Welcome to episode 45 of Wonderspace. It's great to have you on board. My name is Steve Cole, and over the past year, I have been asking the same 6 questions to amazing people from around the world. The questions orbit around wonder and hopefulness, and the setting for each journey is this shared window on the space station, from where we see everything from a different perspective. Before we introduce our guest, our friends at asknature.org are going to help us to re-wonder.
How does spider silk become a thread thinner than a human hair, but 5 times stronger than steel? It starts as a liquid inside the spider containing bundled up proteins. As it approaches the spinning ducts, the liquid becomes more acidic, and molecular bonds holding the proteins in a jumble are broken. Passing through the narrow ducts, the proteins are straightened out and form new bonds with each other, becoming a long cord that is both very strong and very stretchy, perfect for capturing dinner.
Our orbit this week will take us over the coastline of northwestern Australia, and to experience these views with us in this ultimate window seat, we welcome Pete Russell. Pete is the founder of a business called Ooooby, which stands for Out of Our Own Backyard. Their mission is to put local small-scale sustainable farming back at the heart of the food system that we all depend on. The full-length interview with Pete can be found on the Wonderspace podcast, which you can find on our website and on most podcast platforms. But for this shortened video orbit, Pete answers 3 of our 6 questions and starts by giving us a glimpse into his life story so far, with an emphasis on what he is doing currently.
As a child, I grew up in a military family, so we moved around a lot. And I was never really academically inclined, always much more interested in being entrepreneurial. As I grew up and into my adult life, I became obsessed with business. I love business. I love the idea of solving problems and making something more out of problems. And I found myself about sort of 15 years into my business career doing things that were great financially, very lucrative, and I felt like we'd learned a massive amount about business and about people and about commerce and economics and all of those sorts of things, and we were benefiting from that. But I found myself having sort of wound up as being a cog in a larger machine that wasn't resonating with a life purpose at all. It wasn't giving me a sense of, I'm solving an important problem here. And if anything, it was really contributing to larger scale problems that most of us don't even see because they're so big that we don't recognize them. And that business was effectively importing frozen pastries out of Europe in shipping containers, and then supplying them and managing all the distribution into all the supermarkets around Australia, so Woolworths and Coles, plus all of the hospitality industry and so on. And it was a very fast-growing business. But what happened was we had the 2008 global financial crisis, and because we were paying in euros from Australia, the exchange rate spikes happened. Our business effectively capsized. Our business model went from being profit-making to loss-making literally overnight, and we were stuck in a place of what do we do and how do we solve our problem. And it was that moment where I thought to myself, this isn't only our problem, this is a macro problem right now, and there's a lot of food businesses right now in this situation, and we had to figure out whether we were just going to stop ordering the food, because every time we ordered the food it would lose us money. And it made me realize at that point, okay, this is not just about me and my business. This is about being part of a system that cannot sustain these kind of economic shocks, let alone geopolitical shocks or any other sort of shocks that we might see in the future. So that was a catalyst for me to say, okay, I want to play a different game. I want to be part of the solution. and that was the genesis of Ooooby. So Ooooby, it stands for out of our own backyards, and effectively it's a food system based on small scale, independent, ecologically sound food producers. Anywhere from 1 acre or anywhere from a backyard, to up to say 250 acres, but independently owned, typically family owned. And finding ways for those businesses to be able to reach the market and effectively bypass the standard supply chains that had dominated our market. So where we are today is we have 2 hubs in New Zealand, 1 hub in Australia, and we've just signed on our 18th hub here in the UK. I came to the UK 2 years ago. My wife's from here and we always planned on settling here. And we launched 18 months ago, and because of all the foundational work that we'd done over the last sort of 8 or 10 years in New Zealand and Australia, we've been able to roll out quite rapidly. So we've been able to open up one new hub a month. And these hubs are independently owned, locally owned, hubs that are either, and mostly they're farm-based. So you'll have a hub that's a barn on a farm, where that farm is producing a large proportion of the food that is going into the deliveries, but they're also buying from neighbouring farms and from other suppliers to make sure they've got a range that's big enough for people to be interested in. And so what we do is we provide all of the sort of the underlying operational systems and support and sort of business advice and so on for these farmers, or sometimes it's high street retailers like high street grocers, organic shops. Sometimes it's someone who's actually set up a distribution point in an industrial estate. But they're the hubs and they're the locals in their local region that we work with. When you look at all the potential hubs, farms are potential hubs, farm shops, organic retail outlets. There's around about 5,500 of those around the country. If we were just to get 10% of those, that would be 550 hubs. Our targets really are more modest than that. We're seeing our targets of being a couple of hundred within the next 3 or 4 years here in the UK. But the point is that the more hubs we put on, the greater the network effects are, and the more that we can start to build our systems to be able to integrate those hubs together into a network. That network can then do things like share inventory across the platform. So one hub, in Kent can be selling a range of 1,000 products, but only having to hold a range of 50 products. And everything is then, as orders come through, they're sort of honeycombed through the system to be able to deliver to his customers in Kent. So we're facilitating a local economy, as opposed to saying, we're going to create a centralized market. We're building a decentralized but networked market. While we're focusing at the UK at the moment, we are a borderless, business model. We're in Australia and New Zealand already, and we have opportunities opening up in other countries like the United States, Japan, Malaysia, and of course any other countries throughout Europe that are sort of right on the doorstep. My story of hopefulness is the story of Craig Hubbard. So Craig Hubbard, he was my business partner in this business that we had importing pastries into Australia. And there were 4 of us, there were 4 partners, and both he and I became very disillusioned with the bigger model. I started Ooooby. He went and bought a farm on the Sunshine Coast in Australia and called it Shambhala Farm. And he got himself right into it. He threw himself into the dirt literally and became a farmer and learned, by jumping in the deep end. And so while I was working on systems for small scale food production and so forth, he was just working in it. And it was hard work. I thought I worked hard, but he really took on a really huge weight, having to learn something very complex, from scratch, and he basically had to fight his way for survival in this domain. But what's evolved from his last 10 years is that he's realized that the most valuable thing that he has now is experience that he can share with others. And so he's now created a school, a farming school, where you can go to his farm and you can learn how to create your own farm, whether it's in your own backyard, whether it's pots on a balcony, or whether you've got acres. And he has built a very comprehensive process of sharing all the knowledge that he's learned over that period. And I just think that the more people like him there are, the faster we're going to turn this thing around. And it's super exciting. And then the other person I'd have to add is a guy here in the UK, Tolly. He runs Tolhurst Organic down in South Oxfordshire. And what a man. Like I spent a day with him on his farm, and he is somebody who has got so much knowledge and so much enthusiasm to share his knowledge that I think people like him, they are the levers that are going to enable people to be able to take on a new path. You have the choice to perceive what you want to perceive. So I can look at you, Steve, and I can say, oh, look at this guy. You know, he can't be bothered shaving, and he's probably a lazy so-and-so, and he's sitting around in his bedroom and blah, 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 blah. And then I'll see that in you, and I'll start to find evidence of that. And then you and I are in this cycle where we're having this dialogue back and forth, but my perception of you is influencing that dialogue, so I have the ability to pull it down, and then you've got to respond from that next level down, and then I can pull it further down. Alternatively, I can have the perception of you, here's Steve. This is a guy who is enthusiastically, passionately tackling the challenges, the major big challenges that we're dealing with today. And he gets up in the morning and he goes for it. He can't be bothered wasting time shaving. This guy's got no time for that. He's doing something really worthwhile. And from that space, we have a different conversation. I see a different Steve, and you feel that, and you respond differently, and I respond differently, and we have a different type of cycle. And I think that that's one of our most powerful choices that we have to make, is how do we choose to perceive the people in our life? And how do we choose to perceive society? How do we choose to perceive the future? Because by virtue of the fact that we are interacting with people and society and the future, we are influencing the direction in which it goes. And I think all of us have the ability to look at a situation and decide what to ignore and decide what to emphasize and what to feed. And I'd say that is our greatest insight and our greatest power towards making a better world.
To find out more, go to ooooby.org. On the episode page on the Wonderspace site, we will also give you a link to Pete's TEDx talk titled Hacking the Supply Chain. In his story of hopefulness, Pete spoke about Craig Hubbard and Tolly, and more information about their farms can be found at shambhalafarm.com.au and tolhurstorganic.co.uk. To engage with our previous 44 Wonderspace episodes, go to ourwonder.space. I want to thank Pete for joining us on this Wonderspace, and I hope you can join us next week for more wonders and stories of hopefulness.